Hey everybody, welcome back to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news and stories from the Badger State and beyond. Today we're here with Cole Roecker, a Wisconsin birder who also started a Audubon chapter at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And we also did a big day with him not that long ago. How are you doing, Cole?
Oh, I'm doing well. I'm glad to be on the podcast after the big day.
Have you
Uh,
recovered fully from the big day?
I don't think so. I think I'm still calming down and catching up on sleep. It was a long day out there.
So is it more the emotional component or the physical?
Uh, I'd say a little bit of both. I was just looking at our lists, and we had a good day out there. It was frustrating, so I'm feeling that frustration a little bit at our 149 species count, just a bird short, but of our goal. But yeah, I mean, it was a great day out there. So ready for the next one.
Immediately right for the next one. So we were looking at the video, of course. I spent a lot of time working on it. And when I was on my laptop working, I would just be laughing a lot because of some of the sound bites that were on there. Just some of the interactions during that day are hilarious. And you can literally see the mood just going up and down. It's just, we find something else and, oh, hey, morale's high. And then all of a sudden we miss something, his morale is low. And it was just constantly a roller coaster all day. And then I think you can really see in the last clip how tired everyone was because it started to just be nonsensical at that point. But what a wild day.
If your big day is not a little nonsensical, I don't think you're doing it right. You got to get to that point where you're just grinding for that last bird and it's like, 11:50, you got 10 minutes left and you're trying for a last minute owl or something. That should be how it goes, I feel like.
And you, of course, did your own big day before. I think it must have been a few years ago, essentially in Dane County, which is the county Madison's in. How did the one we did differ from that one?
Well, real quick for people that might be unfamiliar, big day is just trying to find as many species as possible in one day. So if you're new to birding, that's what a big day is. They're super fun to do. They can be pretty tough, and it's a real grind, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, no, certainly. I mean, a big day in whatever form you do it, if you go from midnight to midnight or, you're just trying to set your own personal record, they're always a good time. And um, for me, the one that I did was limited to Dane County. I think that was in 2021. And it was very different. I think mostly because of the time in the vehicle. Being that we were in a relatively small space, I mean, compared to like the state of Wisconsin. We did plenty of driving, but we also spent just more time out in the spots we visited. And good and bad. In some ways, it's more enjoyable because you're just walking out in nature rather than driving for hours. But on the other hand, you're limited. It was going to be really difficult for us to ever get any kind of big water bird. Gulls, I remember being tough. Every now and then they show up in Madison, but they can be a little hit or miss on the year. Yeah, I say this, and it's not like we pulled anything amazing off of Lake Michigan, but
Yeah, we got a herring and ring-billed gull. So
right. No, we even might have been better off for gulls in Dane County this year, just because we've had a lot more action with the gulls that have been around. Lots of Franklin's gull, lots of Bonapartes are just easy to find, and lesser blackback showed up. I think that was after our big day. I think that was the week after our big day. But yeah, it was just kind of a different vibe. I was with members of the college Audubon chapter that I had started, and one of them was an incredible birder. So it still had a real big intensity. And he was trying to round out his Dane County life list before he left Madison because he was graduating. And so it was pretty cutthroat. I would even say maybe even a little bit more than we were out on the trail. But yeah, it was neat. I mean, I all I've thought about since we've done it is how we might have been able to change our route or our approach to maximize more species. I don't know if you both have had similar feelings.
Well, I remember like the first text you sent us the day after was you seeing an osprey, a bird that we missed out. Just be like, this guy was just out in the open. I'm not even looking for birds, and there he is.
I
Oh,
thought you were gonna say too that your only thoughts ever since the one we did was doing it again.
Yeah, I mean that's they go hand in hand. What we did wrong so that we can do it again for the do it
Yeah,
better for the
exactly.
next.
We went out today on basically a big rarity chase, and tons of the stuff we saw today was not around when we did our big day. So I think that a lot of the time those late May breeding bird focused big days actually get a higher total than the migratory times because then you can really nail down where the breeding birds are going to be. But we did get a lot of warblers, so I don't think we would have gotten that many warblers if it was during the breeding time. But there's definitely new stuff now in the state that wasn't there a few weeks ago when we did it. We were on the lakefront today, and the amount of gulls was massive. We got a couple really good ones too, and we definitely didn't have that experience on the big day.
Yeah, no, I mean it would definitely change. I think also knowing at least having a better idea that the bird you're going for is going to be there. For us there was a lot of chasing after, okay, well, we hope it's going to be there, and sometimes you get lucky and then sometimes you strike out. So a later day, maybe they'd be a bit more predictable and stationary.
Yeah, and I feel like we didn't have a ton of time to kind of plan out. So like doing it again, one bird we missed on, we just made a quick stop for black crown night heron. And that's one where if you staked out that spot, you kind of know a little better where they were, and you could probably get it from the road then. So you could just stop, pick it up real quick, and then move on to the next place. Like I'd be interested in doing the same exact route and just optimizing your species better and seeing how many more you could pick up that way.
What does that mean?
What do you
Do the
mean?
same route but optimize it better?
Yeah,
How would
like
you
have a better
optimize it
idea of
better?
where things are. So like, this is exactly where the black crown night heron is. We can get Sanderling at this beach. We were just kind of like, let's check
So
McKinley.
you
Let's
would
check
like
this
just do
place.
that route 3 times beforehand, like the week before, just every day. I've seen the night heron
Honestly,
here.
that's not the worst
Well,
idea.
there was somebody that reported a big day that they did, and they said they were staking out the nighttime stuff literally the hours beforehand. So they said we were there at 10 p.m. and then listened for what was there, so we knew where to go right at midnight to start getting the birds right away.
Yeah, I mean that might just be a level that I won't reach. Maybe I will. I don't know. Maybe
You'll reach it. We can
my
tell.
life will have twists and turns, but
Tonight he's gonna be out. I'm scouting for the next day.
Nocturnal flight calls.
yeah, I got the windows open. No, actually, on the osprey follow up, that was one of the birds we had missed that I saw the next day. And I yesterday morning, I live in Madison in the city, and I opened my door to go to my car to work, and there's an osprey calling. I mean, like 25 feet above me. This bird now is just mocking me.
Haunting for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
How
So
long do you think that's gonna stay with you? Where every time you see an osprey, you're like, "Where were you?"
Or you vomit.
yeah, every time I think, and that's like birds. I don't know if that's the case for both of you. I think you've seen quantity wise many more birds than I have with your adventures and um, travels. But some birds, there's just kind of always an association and a memory that, at least for me, I've been birding now for just over 6 years.
A
I haven't.
wily veteran in the hobby.
So, you know, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of, I think we left a lot out there. If we had only been chasing species, Derek, you mentioned road birding, and we still spent a lot of time walking around, which is great. It's more enjoyable, and we did get a couple species that I think we only got because we were rooting for an hour at each spot. But at the same time, I think if you're really trying to nail down the species count, you're on the move most of the time.
Yeah, and I think, well, I mean, we were trying to film and document like the whole things that obviously took extra time, and we wanted to get media of stuff, but
That's what I was
really
thinking.
being herd only focused, like that's kind of how we were in the morning. We'd be like, oh, we heard a woodcock, heard a great horned owl, like you're just racking up these species. So I feel like if you did a big day focused basically all on herd only, like you would probably be pretty solid, except for getting some of those species that don't vocalize. But that's really your way to maximize your total.
Yeah, to your point, really, when we would see something, especially something that was kind of rare-ish or something we really put in a lot of work for, we would want to get the media. So we would spend, 5 minutes getting a video of this cerulean warbler, when if we were really just doing it without filming, it would be heard it, we're gone. And
Yep.
especially since one of us had life birds that they achieved during the big day.
Yeah, I mean, in the moment, I wanted to say everything for the big day, forget my life list. But now that the big day's passed, I'm happy that I knocked those birds off of the list because they've been sticklers. I've got a couple others in Wisconsin that I really have to try to get onto my list fast. But
House
you know,
sparrow.
right, never seen one. Um, so yeah, I mean there were so many great moments, and I saw a little pre-cut of the video and just really got to live it back and chuckle at moments I didn't remember very well just from the fatigue.
I think
So
the biggest hilarious moment was probably the Peregrine Falcon debacle because it was super late already and we were just staring at this dark nest box and there was a blob in there and we're trying to use logic to figure out if it's the Peregrine Falcon and there's a nest box cam. We have a thermal imager. It's just, it's off the wall what we're trying to do to count this Peregrine Falcon that if we would have gotten there, 40 minutes earlier would have been, oh, there it is.
right. I mean, I think we hit on, I don't know if I've come to a solid conclusion on whether I think that fits in or out of good bird watching counting ethics. Obviously, we weren't doing anything
Could
to
it actually be the best, the highest of level of bird counting ethics?
you got to put yourself in a tough situation to ask those kinds of questions. And I don't know. I on one hand, I think, well, I mean, come on, it's in there, so that's a counted moment. But then the classic, can you count nest cams? Because you can see the birds on the nest, but
You
you're
can.
not looking at it. You're looking at it by way of the screen.
It's
And
true.
Well, I mean, you're looking at the open one. In our case, we were looking at the open box and then seeing a blob and then seeing the nest cam. And then it's like your mind kind of goes to what if the feed's delayed? What if it's delayed 20 minutes and there's something else popped in there? It's not
Raccoon.
actually the
Raccoon.
the falcon. So you get all these kind of other questions too of, what's countable, what's not.
Man, that
yep.
was really disappointing though. Just after that, we got the rail and then we just needed the one more and nothing was making noise and it was windy.
And if you want some backstory on this, the video will be out on our YouTube channel by now about the big day. So if you want to watch that and then come back to the podcast, some of this will probably make a little more sense
If you
then.
want to see Cole at his finest too, because he had some of the best lines ever.
Uh,
And you can watch them get two life birds too.
Yeah.
that's true. That's
When
true.
you said we're out here slinging birds, we've been saying that ever since that caught on.
Yeah, I have thought the same thing as I see birds go by, especially on it feels especially right in the as you're in the car and you got birds flying by and you're
Oh yeah,
going,
you're slinging them for sure. Just boom, indigo bunting. Boom, eastern meadowlark. We're slinging them.
no, I'm glad that I was able to pull something out because they talk about getting camera shy and it happens to even you think it can't happen to you and then you see the lens staring back at you and it's a tough
That's how it
audience.
feels to be a
You're
bird.
just like a cardinal in a lens. You're calling almighty, and then all of a sudden, boom, get the stage right. But you did a good job. It was funny too because we were talking about how we've known you, for a really long time, but this was the first time we really actually went birding with you, and we're just like, let's do a big day. It wasn't like let's go, someplace for a few hours. It's let's just do a big day. You're in.
Yeah, no, I was right to the max. I mean, I
Oh
thought the
yeah,
thing we
absolutely.
do
Dial
need.
that thing up to 10 right from the get-go, and I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, no, I think it did in a major way. It was a neat thing, and like you said, it's haphazard, slapdash. Derek had mentioned with planning. I mean, planning was sending texts the night before at 9, 10 p.m. Yeah, I think this will be all right. Why don't we try this? So,
It was funny
no,
because I told some of our friends, about the total we got, and I thought it was a good total, but I know that they can be really high. But some of the people I talked to were like, "Whoa, that's really good." So I felt better about it then. I was like, "Okay, we did a pretty good job then for how quick it was." And I don't know about you, but it makes me really want to do it even better and get upwards of the 200 mark, actually. Of course, got to pass 150 first, but I want to get that 200.
yeah, we got to be judicious with our estimation, but
Well,
if
I think the Wisconsin record's in like the 230s.
blows my mind. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's pretty crazy.
especially after the day we did. If anything, that was the biggest lesson I learned was because we had talked about that early on in the day, what the Wisconsin record was. It was definitely above 200. I think you're right, somewhere in the 220s. And, on one hand, that seemed really big then, but after doing the day ourselves, and it wasn't a perfect day by any means, it wasn't, there was a lot of room to grow, but grow up to 220 plus. I mean, that's an incredible tally because I just try to think of the birds that we would have missed on. Obviously, 10 to 15, you could say pretty reasonably. Oh yeah, I mean, Osprey, right, and a couple others.
There's one Sanderling. Yeah,
Looks
there's
like
two.
230 is the 230
Holy
exact is the total.
cow.
The thing
Holy.
about it is, I remember reading the account, and they had, almost 100, I think, before daybreak. They were hitting marshes hard. They were getting owls. They were getting rails. So they were doing a lot of their work before the sun even came up. So, to Derek's point, it was a lot of herd only scouting beforehand. But I also remember that there was a lot of stuff in there that we don't even get in the state anymore. Here's the regular king rail spot we go to. Here's the regular little blue and tricolored heron spot we go to. So I do think that a lot of that stuff may not even be available to get anymore. So I don't know what the likelihood of that record ever falling is.
That's an interesting point. I mean, changing populations over time, and they do change so quickly. I mean, not that I have a super extensive background in, the ornithological side of bird watching, but some, and certainly historical bird watching. And, I think it's easy to forget birds happen on a yearly basis, but the longer term trends, obviously they happen so fast. And, who knows? I look at birds that have entered the state too. That just it seems like a northern mockingbird is a guaranteed species now in Wisconsin, whereas in the past it certainly wasn't. What was considered a rarity. There are blue grosbeaks that seem at least a couple every year that are up here, and I'm speaking out of my authority, but um, it is crazy to just see how quickly things change, and that's something that by the end of my lifetime, hopefully it's a long one,
The
there
good
might
life
be
list.
right. Might be a totally different game in the birds that are available. Unfortunately, I fear that it would be a lower number than we might have now, just with some of the population trends. But you never know. I mean, it's a complicated ecological. Anything is complicated.
Yeah, it's really fun to go back and see how things have changed because I'm reading Ken Kaufman's book Kingbird Highway, where he basically hitchhiked across the US when he was like 15, 16 years old, which even that is just wild to think about, being able to hitchhike. And him talking about how it's just like a regular thing, like you'd see a bunch of people hitchhiking. And he was saying that at that time he had gone to the Keys to get a lesser blackback gull. And he was like, these are super rare. And then the following years, like they had been showing up way more often. And now, it's obviously annual. They show up across the East every year. But back then it was like, oh my gosh, a lesser blackback gull. Like, I don't know when another one of these is going to show up.
How much of that do you think was the lack of communication between birders too?
I think for that one, it was a lot of it. Like, it sounded like he was talking to a guy who thought these are probably way more common than we think. People just aren't looking. But it sounds really fun to kind of bird at that time where there wasn't an established network. It was just kind of people you knew. Like that guy, he knows the Northeast. Like he's the authority. And it was kind of a Wild West. It seemed like a really fun time, but it's probably way more efficient to find stuff now than it was then.
Yeah, it's an incredible, not to run down a rabbit hole, but I did a little work when I was at UW-Madison and in kind of the start of bird watching in Wisconsin in particular is a limiting factor in the early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century. And it was fascinating. I was mostly at the Wisconsin Historical Society and the pretty good holdings of some of the early names. For us, Victor Cutchin was a bigger name. You had every now and then you had some of the larger Audubon and field guide folks mentioning Wisconsin and just reading about how they went about collecting bird information, bird tallies and counts and you know, a lot of letter writing that was, this guy said that he saw this over here and I have it on good authority because I've been out with him and he knows his birds. And then you get on the other side and you'd hear the other, you know, someone would write into, usually it was UW-Madison, you know, the university ran a lot of kind of the centralized spot of collecting this data. And you would get a letter in that would say, well, you know, Joe Smith said that he saw this bird, but he has a habit of making up some of the birds that he sees, so I don't know that we should be you know, putting this in our official tally. It was
Man,
a wild
you
one.
want to have that down in a letter. That's bad. That stands the test of time that you're a bad birder in writing,
Yeah,
It's
handwritten.
not just hearsay anymore.
right.
I remember too, because I did a video all about whooping cranes, which was really interesting to hear about that and read all the things on how they did counts. It was really one guy going into the habitat down in Texas to try to figure out how many were left. And I was thinking, you know, how accurate was this guy? Because they said, you know, somewhere 16 to 21 essentially cranes left worldwide. And most of the authority is this guy that just hikes into the habitat and that seems like 5 today. I think I got 7 distinct cranes. So that is very interesting how I would say it's evolved, but I still feel like we're just out there counting birds.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't, not wanting to hijack the podcast topic for bird history, sort of history of bird watching, but I was just reading today. We forget so quickly how fast the practice has changed, and you know, obviously in the past when birds got spotted, the tendency was to kill them, you know, because you saw them and you said, well, okay, I need, especially sort of ironically, rarer birds, you wanted to kill them immediately because you didn't usually get the chance to get them in the
Just
hand.
saying that makes it a cringy, you know, just, hey, that might be the last one. Boom, got him.
There's a real rough ivory build story. I don't know if it's true, but it was like kind of legend where there was a guy who said, I see these all the time. And the government was like, no, you don't. And then he like shot one and threw it down on the desk, like, here, this is one. And it's just like, oh man.
Oh, that's, I was reading the one as far as an upper Midwestern interesting bird and a late bird for North American ornithology, late discovery was the Kirtland's warbler. Remains a very elusive bird. And but it was discovered very late because its breeding is so specific. So in the early 20th century, it was like in 1903 that the first nests of the Kirtland's warbler were found, which is
Right.
relatively speaking very late. And when they were found, the ornithologist is in Michigan, and the ornithologist with the University of Michigan, forgetting his name, went straight out there and killed 7 birds because he's like, whoa, we never get these. And so he found a nest of a male and a female, and I think it had 4 eggs or 3 or 4 eggs. It was a big clutch, and he just went and shot the 2 adults and then collected the eggs and said, lucky me.
Yeah,
Man,
yikes.
glad we don't do big days like that.
That would be a rough big day for.
Don't look in the trunk.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, what about the rare blue grosbeak you found? Oh, it's in the back seat.
You're reporting it like, well, it was here, but you're too late.
Yeah, how do you know? Oh, just trust me. Trust me, you're too late.
So there's an interesting thing
Wait, is this a
in
book club now?
yeah,
Here's a
interesting thing
passage.
that you'd probably appreciate in Kingbird Highway is it was the guy named James A. Tucker. And so basically he moved away from his friends. This was in like 1968. And so like in order to keep in touch, he sent them so like a thing about birds in the area. It was like a newsletter and it was called the Birdwatchers Digest. And he numbered it like as a joke, volume 0, number 0. And his friends like didn't take it as a joke. They're like, we want more of this. And so he made another one, and that was the start of the ABA, the American Birding Association.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so that's how this stuff started.
Does
Like
one
you'd
of his
see,
friends have volume 0 out there? Just,
I hope
mint
so, but
in
you think of these
plastic?
organizations like, oh, they've always been there, but you're like, yeah, this guy like made it as a joke, and now it's a
We
real
could do
thing.
that. We're gonna start a new ABA.
Yeah, I mean it's a crazy. There's not a, at least as far as I've found, certainly there might be out there. My knowledge is not comprehensive, but there's not an incredible, or at least super accessible book out there that maps a lot of the early amateur bird watching. Some of the work that I did, I wanted to sort of tease out and map the progression of amateur ornithology bird watching, I think what we would call bird watching today, alongside professional ornithology, which is of course an older craft. And they were often early on kind of at odds because you had ornithologists who, and no criticism from our 21st century practices, killed birds for research, and a growing group in the early 20th century that wanted to look at them and felt that killing them wasn't necessarily a good thing to do, especially with conservation issues. And so there's so much out there. I never ended up writing anything specific, or really only just amassing hundreds of pages of notes and documents, and eventually switch topics in what I had been working on. But it is a vast pool, and very interesting. And you just get those kinds of stories with like the ABA, where it just seems to kind of come out of nowhere. And now we think of how big, relatively speaking, I know bird watching isn't everybody's, it's not America's pastime yet, but
I've heard that Reese Witherspoon's getting in on it now.
Really?
That's what I heard.
She's hitting that age where it's just coming natural.
Right. I mean, maybe in some ways this feels like a golden age for bird watching.
I think it's gonna be like pickleball, where all of a sudden it's like, oh man, everybody's doing this.
Everyone's looking at birds, slinging birds.
Everyone's slinging birds.
Everybody's slinging birds. I mean, and that's a good thing. I mean, I don't think, in whatever capacity you do it, if you go and do big days and big years, where you're trying to see as many species as you can in a year, the high intensity bird watching, careful list gathering and observation and writing. There's that end of bird watching, and that's amazing. There's also I really like the birds on my feeder. And I love to see, the cardinals and the red-winged blackbirds for Midwestern and Eastern birds. That's also an amazing form of bird watching. And kind of in whatever capacity you're doing it, anywhere in that spectrum, I think is a plus for everybody, for the environment, for the birds, for people. So it's amazing however people are talking about it, or engaging with it. It's great to see that seemingly it is growing, both in the people who do it. It's not just necessarily the retirees who have traditionally been associated with bird watching.
If only we were retired.
I was going to say, they've got a leg up on us, though. You see these people just going out every day, and you're thinking, why don't they have something to do? And then you realize they're 65 and retired.
As some of our friends did say, because we were picking out a lot of stuff by ear today, and they were like, think about how good you'll be in like 30 years. I'm like, I never really thought about that. Like, I'm just trying to get better each day now. But I guess, hopefully in 30 years you're better. Probably have a little hearing loss.
Decline. So since you're a guy that appreciates the history of birds and birding so much, have you gotten into the history of the endangered and extinct species in North America as well?
How do you mean, like in terms of conservation efforts to protect them, or the literal like legislation and oversight bodies that kind of brought that whole idea to the fore?
Sort of the timeline of what happened to each species, because I feel as though a lot of the species timelines and how they went extinct and kind of the lore surrounding them is actually very fascinating. I actually wanted to pick your brain about the Labrador duck, because I did some research a while ago about the Labrador duck phenomenon, and somebody suspected or suggested hypothetically that perhaps the Labrador duck never actually existed as a species, and rather it was a hybrid between, I think it was Steller's eider and some other kind of eider.
But basically that was just a species people said went extinct some time ago.
That may not have gone extinct if it was a hybrid instead, because if you looked at one of the ranges of one of the eiders, and I wish I remembered exactly which two it was, but are you looking it up now?
I'm looking
He's
it
looking
up.
it up. One of the eider's ranges actually receded away from the other one, so it would actually make sense that there were no hybrids anymore, because people used to try to figure out why they would have gone extinct, and there wasn't really a reason, because hunters didn't like the taste of them either, and there's only a handful of specimens on file. So it's just a fascinating thing.
Wow.
So it was Steller's eider and common eider.
Steller's eider and common. Yeah, I mean, this is the first I'm hearing about that specific species. I mean,
There's a new rabbit hole for you to go down.
Yeah, right. It sounds very plausible as an explanation. I know that there is again, it's kind of something we took for granted when we can take so many pictures of the birds and, send messages and internet forums and eBird, to communicate where birds are seen, where that just was not possible. And you had very few people looking at birds and, kind of the classic stories of female birds, female types of a species being mistaken for an entirely different species.
I will
Where
say people I didn't mean to cut you off, but people seem to think very much that it's not. Just doing the Google search, like there's an article, is the Labrador duck a common eider and Steller's eider hybrid? No. Like that's all in the
But
title.
that's one person's opinion.
Ryan has
So who knows, but just wanted to throw that out
I
there.
think it's fascinating to talk about though, because like you were saying, there's so many birds out there that could have been misidentified. I know the probably most famous one is the bird of Washington that
Hmm.
Audubon, I think, drew, and no one's ever been able to figure out exactly what it is. So people wonder, did it go extinct? Did he just fake it to try to mark off as many species found as possible? Was it a hybrid? And there could be birds out there that went extinct before we even knew about them too. So there could have been species roaming around North America that went extinct before anybody ever cataloged them.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we would have plenty of reason to believe that that's the case. I mean, especially with the Ice Age, timescales going into the past on like environmental change obviously can get very big, but some of them are pretty small. I mean, relative to geologic age. And the Ice Ages, I mean, 20,000 years ago in current, Wisconsin, United States, Wisconsin, was extremely wildly different than today. And so how that affected bird movement and where they, not to pull back to this Kirtland's warbler, but I had been reading about it recently, and
You
they
must
were,
see a Kirtland's warbler. What can I say?
yeah, I mean, it's I'm trying to manifest a moment, but it, the recession of glaciers and how that affects, because they're, known to breed in only young jack pine stands. They can't get old enough, and so, or they can't get too old, then they're no good anymore for them. So, recessions of glaciers and the burning, and this part of this too, certainly influenced by indigenous peoples in North America before Europeans. I mean, so such rapid habitat change. It sort of would suggest that those sorts of events, if not extinction, range shifting and pushing in and out of ranges would have been very common. And maybe a little bit less so than now that, the landscapes are being so rapidly developed. But it is an endlessly interesting question. It's so hard because we just don't have I don't think we'll ever have all of the evidence we would want to say very concretely, yes or no to these species.
Yeah, I feel like people are very resistant to change. Like whatever it is now, they're like, "Oh, we can't let it recede or change from what it is at all. It has to always be this." Like they're very much like what it shows now, that's what we always have to keep it as.
Are
But
you
like
talking
things
about
are constantly
ranges or
changing.
what
Yeah,
do you mean?
ranges.
Well, I mean, ranges are so hard because you don't know exactly how it's going to end up. Because evening grosbeak is one that's receding back into Canada, and you have to think that's not good for that species if that range is moving further north. But who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it there are folks out there much more knowledge than myself that are trying to kind of predict these, predict these sorts of things. And, you very quickly kind of reach more philosophical questions about environmental protection. Should we be trying to protect a sort of stagnation of species? Like, should we, oh, we really want the evening grosbeak just to be right here where it's always been, because that's where it is now. And certainly it's not, these sorts of arguments will get misconstrued, and sort of people will twist them into saying, oh, we don't need to do environmental protection. Oh, we don't need to worry about it. It figures itself out. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. But it's a pretty deep conundrum, to say, what do we try to quote unquote protect? What do we, try to maybe bring into the future, like shape as we move into a very different ecology? Yeah, those are really hard questions that are hotly debated among ecologists and the people who are trying to answer some of these questions. I don't think that there's you can look at a lot of issues, and there's not a lot of consensus on what the right things to do moving forward are, because it just can look so different based on what your end goal is.
Yeah, it's interesting because right now it's like, oh, you lose an evening grosbeak, you get a limpkin and a mockingbird and a Carolina wren. So it's these trade-offs of these southern species moving up and these northern species moving out. But it definitely is changing kind of before our eyes.
What I think is weird is how much, and I'm going to use the word control, it may not quite be the right word, but how much control we as humans have over the species that exist and the way that they move. Because so many things have happened that have helped species expand, humans directly importing things like house sparrows and starlings, and then humans altering the environment. We do prescribed burns now. So much of what exists out there exists in a way that humans choose to shape it, which I think is crazy because now in Wisconsin, there's a lot of push to restore oak savanna. So you have to have that debate. How much of it is caused by humans? How much of it was natural that led to a species decline or increasing? And then how do you decide how much effort you need to put in to bringing it back to what you perceive as normal? It's just a
Right.
Pandora's box of ethical dilemmas involved with ecology.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because and sort of the environmental history side of me immediately wants to ask, and here I'm sort of working off of a historian I worked under at UW, whose name was William Cronin, Bill Cronin, who super fundamental and kind of environmental history as a discipline, and launched a big debate now that's with historians and ecologists and asking what's normal, what is the normal state of an environment, because um, older ecological ideas of some kind of steady state, some kind of equilibrium, that an environment could reach, have sort of been taken back. That just isn't really how they work. They push and pull constantly, and so to nail one down is hard. And then really quickly kind of changing or evolving understanding of how indigenous people, Native Americans across the Americas, really deeply changed their environment, mostly by way of burning. They would um, burn tons of the eastern seaboard and out into the Midwest. I mean, annually, as part of fitting their lifestyle. It helped their hunting. It's a lot easier to hunt deer when you only have an oak savanna. You don't have a bunch of low brush covering the sight lines. You have just large trees and grasses. And cultivation and agriculture. I'm doing a lot of generalizing here, but just to mention. And so is that are we going to consider that the landscape to return to? Because that was, for thousands of years was one way that North America existed. But then before that, even before the peopling of the Americas, do we want to go towards that? And sometimes it can be difficult to reconstruct exactly what that looks like. And I think it's so interesting to try to dig into that question of control, because you're totally right, Ryan. We have such a huge influence on the environment, how quickly we've been able to change things, and like point to certain birds. Look at the whooping crane. Um, that is, I think you could very much say, a human hand that has kept that species in the running, and that among many others.
A human hand that happened to be inside of a crane puppet.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, but that at the same time, it is such a story of unintended consequences. There have been so many things that we've done thinking they were a great thing to do, only learning so far after the fact, sometimes not that far after the fact, that actually they had extremely, deleterious effects on populations. DDT is one that I'm thinking of, where we kind of
That's
thought that
absolutely true.
a wonder product for that was related to the environment. I mean, yes, it was a type of killer, trying to keep down pests and all kinds of bugs and creepy crawlies. But we thought it was, gold, and then it was so damaging to especially birds. But um, 10 years that was humans had figured it out, and then
Oh
10 years
yeah.
after that it was like, oh
Riding
boy.
high on that DDT.
No,
And
I
there's
mean, I feel like that's a really good example of the science working, of being like, hey, this is causing a problem. Like, let's get rid of this. And then they did, and then things bounced back. So, I think that's one of the better displays of like, hey, the research has a profound effect of like, let's study what's actually going on and then make changes as a result.
I feel like it's funny because it always kind of comes down to what Jurassic Park goes over, which is just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. But we always reach this point of sort of pseudo-intellectualism where we're like, maybe humans don't know what to do. Like maybe the environment is greater than us, man. Like we always just kind of get to that point, like the answers are there are no answers.
right. Yeah, this is again drawing from Bill Cronin. This is the last lecture that he gave. And so in mapping a lot of the environmental history of the United States, you get a lot of that story where it's like humans think we figured it out. This is the cheat code. We know what we're doing. You can look at so many industries. Agriculture is a big one, mono agriculture. And in a lot of ways, it's done a lot of great things. But there are so many other things we didn't envision. Dust Bowl, that are just, until you deal with them, you don't know that they're coming. And Derek, I think you're pointing to what is so it's so difficult in making these decisions, and absolutely listening to research and supporting research and asking these questions, hopefully before they manifest, right? Before they happen. But what Cronin argued at the end, which was very powerful, and he delivered it in a way that was, much more artistic than I will here. But the idea is that even if there are so many terrible events that have happened because of what we've developed, CFCs are another one, destroying the ozone. Thought that was, won the Nobel Prize, the person, forgetting his name, who discovered those, won the Nobel Prize because it was thought to be so perfect, and then it was bad. All of that's to say, all of
Like
these,
eggs.
yeah, I mean, all of these wonder stories that turn out to be actually crises shouldn't completely stop us from acting. The theme you can take out of that quickly is, well, we should just stop touching. Everything we touch, we break, but that's not sustainable either.
Well, then you look at, back to the whooping crane. If we didn't touch it, it's gone. So yeah, it's how much force do you apply to get whatever it is back on track?
There's also this balance too of, say we don't touch anything, then people aren't experiencing nature in a way that makes them want to save it either. Because say with the Kirtland's warbler, you say, oh, they're so in decline that no one should see them. No one should even look at them. But then kids don't
Don't look at that
they
Kirtland
don't
warbler.
appreciate it. They don't have that experience. Like, is it worth taking people up to see it so they appreciate it? Like, is that interaction worth, maybe some possible decline? It's kind of that balance of like, will this spark more people, or is it a negative effect on whatever species it
Well, I
is?
think that's a big question on the future of birding in general, because if there's a big boom and tons of people get into birding and everyone's trying to see the rarest birds that are out there, will that lead to more of those birds being in a better position or in a worse position? Will the amount of people going to see a rare bird possibly harm it to the degree where it's actually detrimental? Or will enough people out there getting a spark of passion for ecology and for birding and for saving birds lead to an overall resurgence in those species?
It's going to be like Pokemon. They're going to be like, these are your three spark bird options. You can go see one of them.
Yeah. Here's your starter bird. Do you want boreal owl? Do you want...
And if you see this one, you can't see the other two. You just
Is
you
ivory
get
bill
one of them.
woodpecker the equivalent of a Zapdos then?
One of them, sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I mean that's $1 million question. I think that's a much more than $1 million question. It's um just an impossible thing to answer, because you can say right away, well, you lose the battle, win the war type thing, where, okay, maybe pushing to see a lot of these birds and drum up excitement and get people involved might affect, some of these species in a negative way. But we're going to bring in so many more hands to protecting species and to having even more environmental interest and consciousness, and then you're winning in the long run. And that's, you know, I don't, if somebody has the answer to that riddle, I hope that they're going to find a way to, spread the word, because it's an impossibly difficult question. I think people are doing their best. I think that is always something to try to remember with these decisions. By and large, can't speak for everybody, but by and large, people have the right idea. They want to protect animals or the environment or people and the people who live in those environments. And we have different ways of going about it, and that's where the good stuff happens. The debate and the ideation and the policy making. But so long as we keep those principles kind of at the heart of just wanting to try to, this quickly descends into cliches, but wanting to try to do good by the species and the environments we want to enjoy, we'll hopefully find ways to protect them, to make a difference, and become part of the ongoing process that I think is just never ending.
I think one of the hardest things right now is seeing these things that are out of your control negatively impact birds. Well, I mean, you can do like a little bit, like last year we had the McCormick Place incident where that building in Chicago killed a ridiculously high number of birds, and they're like, what can you do about it? It's like, sign this petition. It's like, yeah, we'll share the petition, but it feels like, there's not much you can do with that kind of stuff. Or I think they're gonna try to build some wind farm out in the Gulf of Mexico where the birds are migrating through, and it's just like, why are you doing that? It's like, you feel like you can't control that stuff too much. Like, you can sign and share a petition, but out of that, it's tough to feel like you can make a difference there.
Yeah, I mean, and that is tough. I mean,
Feral cats.
right. It sort
Feral
of,
people.
you look at things that seem easy to answer, like the feral cat question. It does sort of seem like there's an easy answer as far as doing good by the environment, which is get rid of feral cats. I love cats. I have,
Yeah, put the disclaimer on it.
yeah, I have to put the
I
disclaimer.
would never hurt a cat myself.
He's running for office on it.
Yeah, but there's so much evidence to show how bad they are for the environment that they're in, and yet there is not a push. I don't even know that there are really like rumblings of doing anything to address. And this isn't just birds, this is small rodents, mammals broadly, lots of things in the environment that are really negatively impacted by feral cats. But it's not a sexy campaign to say, let's go kill cats. And so what do you do? And boy, that's a hard one. I guess I just try to say, please keep your cats indoors. That's
And then
all
you're met with pushback on that too. So,
my cat
how
needs
bad it
to
would
be
go.
outside. He gets bored if he's inside.
He's smarter than most people. You can't live a
He would
sedentary
never
life.
hurt anything.
He's too
That's
fat.
that's the biggest one. He would never, they never hurt anybody.
Not my
But
cat.
Fluffy wouldn't hurt a fly.
Yeah, I wish there should be, I think it would help if people could get some, well, and I think the data's out there, there are some really, the amount of birds that one cat can kill in a day. I don't want to be misquoting statistics. I've got a number floating around in my head that's like near 100. Like it's a very
He's
crazy
going to the
amount.
phone. He's
Yeah,
fact checking you.
We have the technology.
I would appreciate the fact check. If it's not 100, it's any more than zero is too many, right?
It's 100 if they're doing a big day.
Right. The cat hits their big day, but to their credit, they're machines. They're good at what they do, and
Oh, yeah.
what they do is kill, for sport, as do we. But that's a whole nother rabbit hole, and there's
I believe the most efficient hunter in the animal kingdom is a type of cat. It's not a feral cat. It's one that actually belongs in the environment, but I believe it's the actual most efficient hunter that there is. So can't fall too far from the tree there, the apple, so to speak, with the feral cats.
right. I mean, and they just it seems like in all of the really difficult questions there are to answer in buildings and climate and really hard questions, feral cats are kind of an easy one, so to speak, quote
So to
unquote.
speak. Yeah.
There is a very specific solution that probably will take care of the problem pretty quickly. And we still can't get a lot of the support to do it for understandable reasons. It is, as we've talked about, just hard to convince people to kill any animal, let alone
Well, you get into that owl debate too with the barred owl and the spotted owl
or at the
out in
spotted owl. It's
Yep,
coming up in every bird podcast these days.
absolutely. And here it is, rearing its head again.
All right, I don't have like every day, but the stat was estimated 1.3 to 4 billion birds a year and 6.3 to 22.3 billion mammals killed
That's insane.
by free-ranging
That's
domestic
billions,
cats.
billions of animals.
Billions. You got to get one of those pictures, like, I mean, really upsetting pictures as far as, I mean, there's a famous one from the late 19th, early 20th century of bison hunters out in the West, and there's piles of tens of thousands of bison skulls. There's a hunter sat on, he's the size of an ant. So you can start to understand the scale of slaughter. And putting together like a, you know, best worst of video, I guess, of cats just taking out mammals and
I wonder if
birds.
you put a camera on a cat and we're able to see like, some gruesome things and put that together in a short film, if that would respond with
Picturing it
people.
being a film noir.
Like a Charlie Chaplin?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
Charlie,
think
Charlie
that's the right
Chaplin.
medium.
Get a little top hat on the cat and
People are just like, I love him. He's great.
I do
He's
think
out there
that
slinging birds.
I do, I do think the problem is that the cats are more close to home for a lot of people than the outdoor creatures are. So, they have their cat that's inside part of the time and they go outside and pet it and it's just hanging out. And
Yeah, it's not like someone has their pet eagle and it's out there killing cats.
well,
Like, you
stuff
gotta keep
happens.
your eagle inside, John. He's killing cats out here.
The eagle sometimes does the cat calling work that the government doesn't want to do. But
yeah, I mean it the only thing that I ever get, because I try to reach out to the people, who are resistant to it. That's the best you can try to do. And the one that maybe has the most success is by saying, it's not good for your cat to be outside for your cat's sake. Like it as good as it is at killing, it is still a domesticated animal and it can't protect itself in the way that its, very old ancestors might have been able to. And so they're at risk to be, killed by coyotes and hit by a car,
yeah.
and killed by humans. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm the one out there that's trained on the outdoor cats, trying to cull the herds, but people, you never know. And so for the
herds.
cats, for the cats too, it's in their best interest to be inside. And then that's a win all around. And wouldn't you want to be closer to your cat? I mean, keep them indoors where you are. So
I hate my cat. I don't want it anywhere
There is
near
the
me. Put that thing
lifespan
outside.
expectancy difference where it is very noticeable that the cat lives longer indoors than outdoors just because of the various perils. I mean, pesticides too. Anything that can harm wild animals.
It's
is out
bringing
there, too.
ticks in your house too. It's bringing diseases in.
yeah.
It's disgusting.
Sounds like we've solved the problem right here. I mean,
I think environmentalists, they have the solution. It's just getting everyone else on board.
yeah, it
There's
is.
so many of them out there too. I always bring this up when we talk about cats, but we were in California. It was essentially a cat city of just these feral cats, and people had water dishes and food bowls out there feeding them, and you just saw this plague of cats descending right next to a yellow-billed magpie nesting site, and you just looked at that and thought, man, that's brutal.
You feel defeated. I
You
mean,
feel defeated, and then you realize you just got your yellow-billed magpie lifer, and then you try to turn a blind eye to the cat parade
They just kept coming out of the forest.
coming out of the
Like,
woodwork.
yeah.
that is such an upsetting image.
No, we got videos of it. We're just walking amongst the cats too. Just
It was kind of funny because it's like, I need a lot of feral cat footage for a video I'm making.
yeah, I was making a video about
So he's like, this is,
things that you can do to help birds, and
I need this.
yeah.
I need this
I
shot.
said, just give me 15 minutes. I need all of this. This is exactly what I needed.
Yeah. Oh man. No, the city, your feral cats in the city, barn cats in the countryside
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
They they just are able to. I see them all the time out in. I grew up in a sort of suburban exurb area, and just the amount you see them all over, and they're sneaky. I mean, you don't see them for long because they're out
They'd
back
snuck
in.
up on me a time or two.
In truth, it's either a raccoon or a cat. I mean,
It is kind of alarming, actually, even in just the suburbs, how many times you're driving at night and you just see a cat run across the road. You
Right,
know,
right.
why? Why is it this way? There's
And
actually
those
a lot of, I mean, feral dogs aren't great either. And
there
we
was a
don't
big
seem to have that
campaign.
many feral dogs. At what?
There was a big campaign. Bob Barker. We need Bob
Oh,
Barker.
oh
That's
yeah, yeah. We need the Bob. We need Bob Barker of cats, essentially.
Bob Meower, I guess. Or-
Yeah. You can become Bob Meower. He's more of an idea than he is a person.
yeah, no, it's a tale that a lot of bird enthusiasts know already. It's
Nice
kind of
pun.
yeah. Thank you. I'm working on my presence in on the camera and on the podcast, but um, it a lot of times the issue, of course, and this is environmental work more broadly, is that you're preaching to the choir. You're talking to the people who already believe what you do and agree with what you think. And I've not just in environmentalism and in any campaign to try to make a change, it's always trying to reach out to the other side and try
You
to
know,
get
where-
them.
you know where the other side is? Instagram. Because we made a thing about a feral cats, and it just got tons of people from all sides being like, "My cat needs the outdoors. He gets depressed inside." Like all different
We all
kinds of
get depressed
wild
inside.
comments.
Join the club. Give him a job. See how depressed he gets.
Yeah, he should be working a 9 to 5 desk job.
Slinging burgers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is interesting every now and then you see on social media when you do reach the algorithm, reaches out to the other side and then it quickly tumbles out and you just turns into a hailstorm of,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
You can make a campaign like, do you know where your cat is during the day? Shouldn't it be in school? Shouldn't it be at work?
Yeah. Well, who knows? Hey, we were
This is
talking.
gonna make you upset, Cole. These are some of the comments. Are you dumb? They're predators and they need to go outside. Don't have a cat if you can't accept that it's a cat. Don't care. That's a good one. Nah, my son, in parentheses, my cat, likes going outside. Keeping dude inside whilst he is yelling at me to be let out seems cruel. I live in a rural area, so he isn't gonna get hit by a car. I love him to death, but he's a capable young man and ain't gonna keep him locked up in the house when he could be outside enjoying himself.
Oh man.
Crazy how cats used to live outside and kill birds, and we still have birds. Don't these just hurt your brain?
I
Nah.
think his brain is hurt.
Forcing an animal to stay inside is toxic.
Oh man. I mean, I will. I don't. I'm not an ecologist. I won't claim to be one. This is out of my amateur love for the environment. Sometimes, some hours, but in libraries and archives and out in the field. Um, See, I feel like for those people, and they have their space. They have their. I see where they're coming from because they don't see the other world. I think for them, my impression is trying to just get reach out to them so that they can hopefully wrap their head around the scale of the issue. It's not one bird here or there. It's not a chipmunk once a week. It's many, many animals. Derek had that number out there annually. Billions of animals. More, I guess, hey, comparisons on the fly. Maybe 2 to 3 times the amount of humans on Earth per year. Like that is a large number. And I agree that we want cats to be happy and we want them to
I'm
be
kind of
living their
indifferent.
best life.
Kind of indifferent at this point.
Somebody said keep the birds inside instead, and think about how much easier it'd be to do a big year then. It's
Uh,
like there's the osprey in the corner of my house.
Shoot them, put them in a taxidermium, put them in a drawer. Then you have them for, I
We're
mean,
really coming full circle now.
yeah, no, I mean, it's,
Ecologists listening to this are just crying. They're just in tears.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to the ecologists and environmentalists and scholars of these subjects who are shaking their head and uh, you know, bemoaning the damage we've done to the environmental cause. And then I'm also sorry to the people who are totally against these topics and think we're just off our rocker. We might be. I mean, that's
Well, it's great how we started just talking about big days, and then we just went into conservation, and now, of course, it just ends with feral cats and reading comments on social media. That's how it had to go. There was no other way.
we hit a big day of sorts for a bird watching podcast, I would say.
That's true. Yeah, we did. It's been big.
Um, no, but it's the kinds of things you can go on and on and on about. I mean, and lots of ink spilled about these subjects by far more um, well-read experts who also struggle to get to any kind of conclusion because or solution because it's such a hard question, and or any of them is a hard question. What do we do? And so,
You
you
gotta
know,
figure out what you do.
Yeah, I figure what you do. Yeah, that's fair.
So
go do it
to
today.
to take this in another direction, a little lighter. What's the next? You got a couple life birds on our big day. What's your next one you're going after?
Ah,
Feral cats.
Don't shoot it unless it's with your camera.
yeah, no, I've got a couple Western Wisconsin species that have been um, kind of, I've just never gotten out towards the Mississippi River Valley where they're more common. Yellow-breasted chat, that is a major miss for me. That should
They're
be,
very elusive sometimes.
yeah, but should be easy to find. If I
That's
had
what you
I
think.
think there's one at Meso right now.
I guess I'm getting in the car. No, a couple that for sure I can knock. Oh, this is probably my biggest miss. Prothonotary warbler.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That one is it's one of those birds, where it's always around. They're not
Out by
common,
you, it's not.
no, but uh, I guess I'm repulsive is
Oh,
is
that's
but that one for sure. And I think are they breeding out in Wailusing?
they
You can
sure
get
are,
them at
buddy. They
Wailusing,
sure
yeah.
are breeding out there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's probably where I'll head. I probably, hopefully, could grab a couple birds out there. But
Wailusing big day.
it'd be interesting to do a big day on the west side of the state.
Yeah, I feel as though it's not as heavily birded out there, other than maybe that Wyalusing area. But if you went all the way up Mississippi coastline, probably find a lot of stuff that no one knows is out there.
Yeah, there are a lot of counties. I've done some online scouting out there just for hotspots, just for places to hit, and it's surprisingly sparse. I mean, and maybe not. Far fewer people live out there, but there are, whether we're counting them or not, there are definitely a lot of birds out there, and it would be interesting. This was a much earlier in the conversation here. We talked about the people who kind of have spots where they know they're going to get this bird. And
Like,
when
did
you
we
bird,
talk about that? I'm like, well, I don't even know. We've meandered so far.
right, but here's your king rail spot, and so then you have that set for your big day. And when you bird one spot a lot, and you start to be able to pin down even just like this half acre. I know I'm probably going to get this bird, and not even just like breeding, right? Like year after year.
This is where Lenny sits and sings at 2 o'clock p.m.
To your
every
point,
Thursday.
sometimes it's the same tree. Oh, I round this corner at this nature preserve. There's 8 out of 10 times an indigo bunting up in this tree. Oh, the meadowlark I usually hear calling from that field over there. It is oddly specific how you can get to know a parcel of land.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's obviously habitats that are preferred by birds. That's the determining factor there. But it takes time. Even really talented birders, it just there's something you cannot replace with time and familiarity. And so when you get to know a tract of land super well, where year after year in and year out, you can kind of point to this really specific set, of trees or bushes or grasses or whatever, and say, yep, this is. And then, of course, this is the spot I'm going to get this bird. And then, of course, you see habitats where you would think, oh, I mean, talk about yellow-breasted chat. This is textbook yellow-breasted chat habitat. I'm going to get one. And then you don't, because they just, for whatever reason, that's not where they go. For something that we can't figure out. That's the long game. That's that 35-year,
It would be kind of fun to do a big day in a place you know nothing about. Like I'm just gonna go to I found these 7 hotspots. I'm just gonna go there and do a big day and see what happens with no knowledge of what might be there.
I don't even know if you would want to call it a big day. You'd just be like, I'm wandering. I'm off grid.
It's I don't know, like it's going to a place you've never been. I mean, imagine you just go to a woodlot. I do this in northern Wisconsin. This is where this for me happens. I don't have enough phone service to be going on to eBird and looking at hotspot data and stuff. Where you just kind of show up and you say, "Well, guess we'll see what's out here." Actually, I was just out in Washington State this past weekend as a perfect example, and I was on a hike with my girlfriend and didn't take the binoculars. She's not in as the bird watching, but I'm trying to get birds that I don't usually see. So, and I don't even really know what to expect because I don't know Western birds all that well. Certainly mountain species out there, and we were hiking in the Cascades, and Townsend's warbler just had like 15, 16 of them throughout the 4 hours we were out on the trail, obviously on territory and calling and just thinking, I mean, I knew nothing about those birds. Of course, usual suspects. You had red-breasted nuthatches out there, super common. But I don't know. On one hand, it's exciting because it kind of brings back that moment when you didn't know birds in your area, and all of a sudden you're just hearing a call that you know is different, but you don't know what it is, and trying to get eyes on the bird, trying to say, okay, well, how would I write this song down so that Merlin bird ID, sound ID now defeats this whole like process where, it was early on, the best story I've got on it, early on in my birding, this is very early on, first couple months I was doing it, the Eastern Towhee, simple song to remember, drink your tea. It's very easy, very good mnemonic, but they've got that singular note. I don't even know how I would describe it. Where they
like it's like a whistle.
Yeah, like a little whistle, like
Yep.
that's very different and very different than the drink your tea. You can't get the like, oh, it's got a similar.
Doesn't even sound the same at all.
Right, and they're skulky, and so I was out walking and I hear this, and I'm like, what is that? And they don't do it that often, so it's not something and I chased this bird around in the brush for like an hour. And it got dark and I didn't get it. And and then even just going online and trying to click through bird sound libraries, it's not the first one you ever click on because it's like 6 or 7 down because it's just a call. So it was like impossible to get to it. It was weeks until I finally
thinking you found an extinct species.
Is this the ivory-billed woodpecker? Is that the noise that it makes? No, I finally, like weeks after, months maybe. I mean, I finally had enough light and I'm walking and all of a sudden I hear the call and I look over and there's a towhee in the tree. And I'm like, you're kidding.
I bet you will never forget that for the rest of your life because of the work you put in though.
Exactly. I mean, in that it was I as I've been, trying to tell this story, I have all where I was turning my head, it's ingrained in my memory. And I'm not at all against the Merlin sound ID. It's incredible. I mean, it obviously makes mistakes. Big caveat. Doesn't replace good documentation and ethical bird watching. But it's impressive. I mean, it's so impressive, and it makes it so much more accessible to people to identify the birds that they're hearing without coursework. I had coursework. Early on, which was just such a good leg up on learning birds. And so, but yeah, now that it's there, you don't have those moments. It's not the same chasing around in the dark in bushes to holding my phone up to the sky and saying, "Oh wow, look at that. That's a cool bird."
And then next time it comes up, oh wow, Eastern Tour. Like, and then next time, what is that? But now it's ingrained. I do feel like that happened to me when I was starting with Song Sparrow, just because they were everywhere. I'd be like, oh, that's weird. What is that? Oh, it's Song Sparrow. That's weird. Oh, it's Song Sparrow. Then you're like, nope, that's Song Sparrow. Not gonna get me again, buddy.
And then you're like, that's a Vesper sparrow. You're like, that's a Savannah sparrow.
Yeah, that's a little brown bird. I mean, it in some ways, being that I was born, believe it or not, on the other side of the millennium. I'll never know a life that was before the internet. I mean, it was still my young memories were like early enough before the internet, but at least in bird watching, because I need to claim something as interesting. I did come to bird watching pre-Merlin Sound ID. I came to it where you just had to grind and listen to bird songs and
Well, can you imagine before there was even a database of calls to look through?
right.
I
And that
I feel like having a mentor is great now, but back like 50 years ago is, I'm assuming, a necessity.
yeah.
Like, I don't think your parents, you'd be like, hey, what's this? But like, I don't know. You need like the guy down the street who, has the binoculars and is outside to tell you what all that stuff is and teach you.
Yeah, I wonder how those developed in like or early ornithologists to how well, you imagine they had to be pretty adept. They spent a lot of time doing it, but um before there was any way to record anything, just kind of how good, this is a weird speculation. How good were they at bird watching? Like how good were they by ear? And there are lots of great stories, more common birds, obviously. Lots of people thought about and remembered the sounds that they made. But you know, there are lots of birds that you don't see. Super cerulean warbler, another one where that's not a song you're seeing every day, you're hearing every day. So how many people were out there that could say, oh yeah, that's this guy? I'm curious. I mean, I'm curious what that number would have been.
If anything, I think from this podcast I've learned I definitely would read a history of birding book to gain some insights on that. I feel like that'd be pretty
That
cool.
you should probably write.
Well, if anybody out there listening over the airwaves has a little bit of pocket change that they're looking to unload, fund such a research endeavor, I'm always available by email.
I heard
And
the U.S. government is looking for just the project, actually.
oh right, that's got to be at the top of the list. I mean, no, I hope down the road. I mean, it's a goal of mine to be able to dig in to some of these things. And there have been books written. I don't want to sell short the work of others. There are a couple out there. There's one, I'll look it up myself for the author's name. I think I have the author's name right. There's a book out there. Haven't read it, but it has been reviewed well. Called In the Field Among the Feathered. I think Thomas Dunlap is the author of that. It's been out for 20 years or so. He's a historian, an American historian, and that apparently looks at the history of field guides in particular.
Interesting.
And there's been work out there. There was actually in Wisconsin, there was a Wisconsin author that published, associated with the Wisconsin Historical Society, that published a book on birds in Wisconsin. Michael Warren, I think, is the name of the historian. Oh, I have that wrong. Maybe I did some work on medieval birds. Michael J. Warren is
Like dragons?
yeah, no. Hey, not to break another podcast subject. One thing I did actually write a fairly lengthy study on was medieval bird symbolism, avian symbolism in English medieval texts, which is a fascinating topic. Really, actually, really, really interesting and connected to. It was really comparative literature. I looked at that symbolism and compared it to early naturalist writings in the Americas, and it turns out that they actually those two sets of authors, one's from around 900 AD, CE, wrote very similarly and imagined birds in a very similarly symbolic manner to like 19th and 20th century American and English writers. So that was a fascinating project. But there's a book out there recently came out on Wisconsin birds, and like more about like not the birds themselves, but more about the people who are looking at them. So they're out there. There just aren't many. But yeah, I'd encourage anybody, if you have the time, certainly don't forget the history side of bird watching. There's so much out there, and it really enriches the bird watching experience when you know a couple of the things about how the craft of bird watching came about, or maybe the way that we count birds, or even the populations themselves. We've talked plenty today about how populations have changed even in just 100 years. And you can start to see that when you look at historical writings. So, I mean, there's so much out there. Hey, if there's anything to take away, there is never a lack of information when it comes to just about anything, but seemingly especially bird watching and the environment.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Cole. We appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I thank you for hearing me out on the soapbox speeches. It's it's good to be back.
I think people really enjoy the feral cat ramblings.
Yeah, what's not to enjoy? I mean, everybody, misery loves company, right? That's so.
I'm picturing, the podcast listeners feeling the same thing you did when we went through some of those comments online. It's rough. But yeah, Cole, thanks for joining us, and thanks to everyone for watching this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.